works.
Sorry, y'all, we're having some technical difficulties, but we're trying to get our brother Ikemba, who's the host of this program, back on. In the meantime, Frank, how you doing?
I'm doing good, Tierney.
Okay, so I guess I'll get started in the interest of time. Hopefully, Ikemba can come back in. But essentially, we are WCC. We charge colonialism. We're an organization that seeks to promote the fact that we, people of African descent, must charge our respective governments with the crime of colonialism, that being the issue that we're all facing globally. This podcast is basically where we cover news as well as where we'll cover some readings. And the reading that we have for this week is The Wretched of the Earth for Frantz, Fanon. So before we do, we have some topics that we want to get into. And it looks like Ikemba is coming back into the stream. So hopefully, let's see. Can you hear us, brother?
I can hear y'all loud and clear.
Okay, cool. So I already introduced WCC. I already introduced this is the book club. So I guess it's time for topics. You can take it away since you're the real host.
All right. So appreciate everybody being with us this morning. So yeah, we're going to do our weekly roundup before we get into our reading of Wretched of the Earth. And I want to start off with just talking about what's going on in Jackson, Mississippi. And we talked about this topic last time we aired. And we're about to go on 4 weeks, and the residents of Jackson, Mississippi are going without water. And this is, a serious thing, especially and particularly African people who make up 80% of Jackson. 82% of Jackson is been going without water for close to 4 weeks, and this has been impacted by the winter storm in Texas. So you have also people in Texas who have been affected, and other parts of Mississippi. But I think this is interesting though, because this is a place when I heard about this story, I'm thinking like there's no history. This is just like something. This is an anomaly. Like they haven't had any problems in the past, and they just wasn't prepared. It was unexpected. But doing the research and hearing more about the story, like they had a similar incident like this about 2 or 3 years ago. And so it was known that there was problems with the infrastructure, with the system there. And this is an infrastructure system, the water system, that is over 100 years old. But it made me start thinking about capitalism itself. Capitalism is supposed to be, the system that industrializes and advances technology, all of these advances in technology, and we're better off with this system because we're going to have the most, as a competition, we'll have the best technology put out there. But if you really think about it, the people who are in positions of power, they're not about putting out the best technology. They're just trying to outdo their competitors. So they'll put out something that's better, but they're not going to put out something that's going to fit the masses of people. It's all about putting out something that's better than the next person, so they'll be able to mass produce it and make money off of it. I'm really disappointed too with the mayor, Chokwe Lumumba, because I've been looking at some of his interviews, and he's not really addressing the overlying issue of colonialism and why this is like really impacting African people disproportionately. But let me open it up. I mean, I said enough. See if you have any thoughts about what take place in Jackson.
Well, I can go first. Well, we spoke about this last week. This is really a situation where we are literally being trapped into a system that was not meant to service our people. And so it's no coincidence that anywhere where our people exist, we are facing some of the worst infrastructures. I don't know if you go to different Black neighborhoods around the United States, we always have the worst infrastructures. We always deal with environmental catastrophes. We're always dealing with lead. We're always dealing with companies dumping their waste near our communities, air pollution. And now we see once again a water source that is supposed to be something that is a basic right, a right to have the access to water. Once again, our people are being deprived of that. I think the thing to emphasize is that this country, although it purports itself to be this great place for all people, it's only going to service certain people's needs. And that's just another reminder of this. I would want to know more, though, from you, Ikemba. What is, you said you were disappointed with the mayor, Choko Lumumba, or his son, rather. What exactly is the issue with that?
Yeah, I think well, from what I'm seeing and reading, and it's tough because it's not like I'm sitting down having a conversation with him, getting into his head, but getting into his head of what he really thinks. But this is someone who was aware of this problem. Like he was mayor when the city was going through these issues before, and when I'm hearing him speak about what's taking place, he's passing the buck on to the state and to the federal government. And rightfully so, but I haven't seen him take onus. It's more so, we don't have the resources. The state and the federal government hasn't given us the resources, but he hasn't talked about what he has done to get them to invest. Like what policies that he pushed forward, what sort of movement that he organized to lead to get people to get the country and get the state to be more aware of how serious this issue is. And so, and then, when asked if there is when the water is going to, when will they have water again? Of course, like I don't expect him to be able to give like a date and time, which he says he doesn't know. But I just didn't get this sense of urgency from him as far as like, what are we going to do to prevent this from happening again? And what's happening on the ground to address the people who don't have water? Like, what are they doing as far as getting as much clean water, drinking water to the people in Jackson? If you hear the people speaking, the people on the ground, they're sharing that sentiment, and they're like, man, we don't know when the water's going to, where is the drinking water? Like, we don't know when the water, the pipes and everything is going to be fixed, but I get a sense that they're not getting the help that they should be getting.
Which also,
if it's a matter of, yeah.
It brings up the fact, we talk about what is the importance of Black politics when your people don't have power, and my understanding of the mayor is that he's very much someone who is of that Black power legacy. But when the people are powerless, it just reminds me again how, it's not necessarily an elected official that's going to be the change that our people need. So, Frank, I know you've been wanting to jump in. Frank, you're muted.
Sorry, guys. Just to add to what you were saying about Black leadership, the issue here is it doesn't really matter how many Black people we have into power. It doesn't really matter how many Black leadership we have. The issue here is as long as those people in power don't really have that leadership power to mandate things, to implement things, in favor of their people, that's not leadership. So I think that's one thing that we African are really, fixing. We have people who represent us, but they do not have the political will or the political might or the leadership will to make that decision to affect the life of the people. So this is where the problem coming from, and the reason to that is that although we have those people into power, but again, who pays them? the people that pays them at the end of the day make the decision for them, or they make the decision for the people that pay them. So the people that pay them dictate to them as to what to do. So that's one reason, and we will get into that later, even about the World Trade Center and things. So I think that's the area we are really lack of. It doesn't matter who is in power, but who pay those people in power. So, and as long those things are happening, things within our community, in our district, in our nation, will be very hard to solve.
Yeah, and I think so. Tierney, you had brought up a great point as far as infrastructure and just the investment in the African community here. In general, there's always been underdevelopment of our communities, and so we look around and watch. Even in this particular community, in Jackson, they're talking about how the majority white community has access to water right now, and the reason for that, the reason that was put out for that is because of their proximity to the water plant. But it just seems like there'll always be some sort of an excuse when it comes to why white people are being, like their needs are being addressed as opposed to African people. So I mean, I'm just tired of the excuses. They known this was an issue in a city that's majority Black. It just shows that we're going to always be last when it comes to the allocation of resources, the last to be thought about. They knew that this was a problem.
Could I touch on another point too? Because I think that in itself, for a takeaway for our people to understand, because we have to understand, like, the way white supremacy is organized, it's very meticulous, and they're always thinking ahead. Because, like you said, Ikemba, just the fact that they strategically put the white affluent community near the water source so that in the event that something like this happens, they would not be affected. Don't think that that's a coincidence. They're always thinking years, centuries ahead. So I think that was, a good to bring out, because we see it so many times. There's, like you said, there's always an excuse, but we have to understand that there's people who are thinking long term, people who are thinking in ways that our people are not even thinking, because we're just trying to survive this system. So it's another reminder why we have to organize.
Indeed. And before we move on to the next topic, I want to see if Frank has any closing remarks, and then we can move on to our next.
Let me just add to what Tierney said. You see, a lot of time, and as we African or Black people, when we keep, talking about these things, and people on the other side of the aisle will always say that, Black people love complaining. African people love to complain. They are lazy. They can't do nothing. Every time they complain. And they will say that, white supremacy or the white people don't complain. They do what they're supposed to do. But the reason here is resources are being allocated to those people. You see, equipment are being given to those people as in the best possible way that they will be able to do for them what is right. But we as Black people, African people, how many times do we complain? Do we march? Do we take petition? Do we take our consent to these people? And they never look at it. And as we keep doing it, and then they say we complain a lot, our neighborhood are this, our neighborhood are look like this. But at the end of the day, what is given to the other side of the people is never given to us. So that is why we keep complaining. And it seems that we are just complaining and we can't do nothing.
Yeah, I agree. I think like these aren't even, well, yeah, I guess you can say they're complaints, but they're complaints based on legitimate reasons. We're talking about system of colonialism, and so yeah, I'm gonna get up and complain about it all day, but at the same time, we're developing solutions. It's not like we're complaining and we don't have solutions. I mean, there's several organizations. That's why we ask people to even be a part of the movement. We Charge Colonialism, this organization, who's exposing the contradictions within the society. And I think like it's not even about just complaining, but it's just exposing those contradictions and making people conscious of what's going on within society, so we'll be able to overturn it. But yeah, I mean, this is we belabored what's happening in Jackson. Just want to encourage everybody to do what they can do to spread the word, make as many people as aware of what's happening in Jackson, so we can support our brothers and sisters down there. So we can move on to the next topic. Taryn, you want to introduce that?
Yeah, I'm sure a lot of you have been hearing the revolutionary, the person who has put their life on the line, Mumia Abu Jamal, is in really, really, really desperate need of all of our people to rally around him. Currently, there was, from his team, they released information basically that his health is just deteriorating. His skin is just bleeding. I mean, they said it's thick and leathery. He has just, it's just to the point where they're saying, like, if he does not get out of jail right now, he's going to die, And so I thought it was something to talk about. First of all, yeah, we should talk about Mumia, but just overall, this willingness in our community to forget our political prisoners. I can't get over how many people rally around Free McNeil, free Little Boosie, or like free people who don't have a track record of fighting for us. And then when they're free, they continue not fighting for us, versus people who literally gave their everything to our liberation and we're just silent. And it's something I don't understand, why we don't have the celebrities who were all, going after, different, what's that one guy, A$AP Rocky, like going out of their way to try to, help these people or bring light to the situation. You had people in the community, you had young people, old people, all saying you have to free this young man. Well, I haven't heard anything from A$AP Rocky since he got out, and I certainly haven't heard him speaking up for us. So this is a horrible situation. So I guess I wanted y'all's thoughts. First, I guess, on Mumia's actual condition, but also on our willingness to forget, the people who dedicated everything just for us to be here.
Yeah, I think that this is a very important topic because there's a lot of people, believe it or not, do not know about Mumia Abu Jamal, and his history, the work that he put in, that he continues to put in. I was actually at the rally or speak in front of Krasner. He's the DA in Philadelphia yesterday. From 11 to 1, that was going on, and then they took to the streets. Sister Pam Africa, many other activists and organizers were out there. And yeah, I saw the pictures. You had mentioned the Mumia, his condition, and I had pictures where I wasn't prepared to show them, but you can see the before and the after. They said that the state said that he was not diagnosed with COVID, and then he went to a hospital outside of the parameters of the state or control of the state, and the hospital said that he did have COVID. So I think there's a deliberate attempt on the state to try to kill Mumia. I'm gonna just keep it real, and it was raised yesterday that NPR is asking for someone to write Mumia's obituary. So I want to put that out there as well. Yeah, this was Pam Africa had raised this yesterday. A man that's still alive. So what does NPR know? What does the state know that we don't know? That's what we're trying to figure out now. And so I think there's a deliberate attempt to kill Mumia. Mumia symbolizes revolution. And so, even like, I just want to also just state, like, we have this movement right now that's talking about Black Lives Matter. And they're talking, for the most part, like we're marching, protesting for people who have been murdered by the state. But there's people who are alive right now that's being murdered, attempting to be murdered by the state. And and so if lives matter, we need to do something about that now. But I just wanted to raise those things. Did you want to add something, Frank?
Yeah, let me add something to this thing, to this topic quick. And one thing that we can do also is that I'm just trying to add solution to the issue. We as organization, as we continue to embargo on these things of our revolutionary leader that are, in prison, we have to also knock on the door of our leaders, Black leaders especially, that are in position, because they are the one actually in those places that need to change policy. We can bring out the ill in society. We can bring out the issues. But as long as those in the positions to change those rules are not doing it in our favor, that's where the problem is coming from. We'll keep bringing these things up to light. But as long as those people we elect into power are now forth with what we bring onto their table, it becomes a problem for us. I think recently when this issue came out, Tiani also made a video about it, and we share, we talk about it and stuff. But at the end of the day, we need people in power who represent us as well to make things happen for us. And if again they are working for white supremacy, it becomes hard for us. So we actually need to get to them, in every way that we can, by any means necessary.
Indeed. Thank you for that. And so we're going to move on to the next topic, which is lastly, everyone, make sure that you're supporting the Mumia campaign. Make yourself aware. Go into your community. Talk to people. Talk to people about the Mumia campaign. Talk to them about even the history of Mumia. Make yourself more knowledgeable about what's taking place. And lastly, in 1981, this is when Mumia was in carcer. I think he was either the killing of the police officer, which was on scanty evidence. Mumia is innocent. I think happened in 81. He may have been charged in 82 and arrested. But he's been locked up for 40 years. But John Hinckley, correct me if I'm saying his name wrong, but the guy who attempted to assassinate Ronald Reagan, shot a security agent, Secret Service agent, in that attempt. Has been home for 5 years. So, if Mumia would he still be in jail? These are questions we need to ask ourselves. So we're going to transition into the next topic, our last topic, before we get into the reading. So Frank, so on you.
You muted.
Yeah, I'll be talking about COVID Africa, but before I can, actually get into it, there is something I want to bring out to the light here. A lot of time, the descendant of the slaveholder will always says that, it was not, I wasn't the one that enslaved Black people, or I was not there at that time. I wasn't born at that time, or my forefather did it, or my parent did it. So we should just forget it and move on. But the issue here is, you wasn't born at that time, but even if you are born at this time, but the rule and regulation that was made against Black people, it is still be used by you, and those rule and regulation were laid down by your forefather. So now, what am I saying here? This whole COVID issue here, I think it should be something that has brought light to African people about how the world think about the Black race as a whole in general. Now, before I get into what happened with the World Trade Center, with the whole COVID vaccine issue, other nations have come out like Russia, China, or India and other places, and they have also embarked on the issue of COVID vaccine in Africa. And what happened here, the United States and its allies, France, Britain, and other people that work along with them, they went against those countries only because those countries were not in agreement with the United States and its allies. And they went to say the vaccines those people are taking on the continent is fake, or they are fake, they are not real, only because they were doing that, not because those vaccines, they were fake, although I don't have machine to test it, I'm not a doctor or scientist, but they were doing it as a means of running propaganda so that they can take their own vaccine. In Africa, whether it's a fake vaccine or whether it's a sure to get it into the people. Now, since that did not work, African people did not embrace their agenda, their propaganda agenda. They went on to block to block the proposal that was put together by African countries and other countries like India and so forth to waive the intellectual property right on vaccine. Now, countries like the United States and Great Britain voted against this proposal. Now, it may seem to you that it was in our favor, but it is not in our favor. Let me just read something here quick, and then so that I can connect it there and give time to other people to talk. Now, it says charity in Africa slammed rich nation on Thursday for blocking effort to waive patent of COVID-19 vaccine, saying this will prolong the pandemic for years, improve nation, and push millions across the continent deeper into poverty. More than 40 charities, including Amnesty International and Christian Aid, said Wednesday moved by the Western nations to prevent generic or other manufacturer making more vaccine in poorer nation was an affront on people's right to health care. Now, let me go right here. It says here, African director said Sub-Saharan Africa, 14% of the global population have received only 0.2% of the 300 million vaccine doses administered worldwide, ensuring every African can get, okay, let's leave that right here. Okay, rich member of the World Trade Organization blocked a push by some 80 developing countries led by India and South Africa to waive its trade-related aspects of intellectual property rights or property agreement in root of patent. Now, this right here, it may seem that these countries are actually doing something better, but what happened here is they are not going to give any chance of African people to develop their own vaccine, to develop their own medication, to empower themselves. They will block anything that they think will empower African people. So now, by you waiving this, it's going to enable African scientists, it's going to enable African doctors to come up with solutions. Because what we're saying here actually is just against Africa. The reality here is India is making their own vaccine. China is making their own vaccine. America is making their own vaccine. Almost everywhere in the world, they are making their own vaccine. Even Cuba, every nation, except the African continent. So this move is not because other people want to, only America want to sell her vaccine or whatsoever. It's to limit Africa from empowering. Is to put Africa in a dying position always. Is to put Africa in a position that Africa will be dependent on other smaller countries like the United States. How can a whole continent depend on a smaller country like the United States, smaller country like Great Britain, smaller country like France, smaller country like China? All these things, it's not right. So we the African leader need to stand up and speak against these things and bring the United States to light that, look, you are a small country. We are a continent. You cannot dictate to a continent, and this is wrong.
Hey, I don't even know how to follow. I don't even know how to follow that. But yeah, I mean, I totally unite with that.
Just one quick comment, no transition.
Say that again?
Yeah, because Cuba is also making one too. So the question is also going to be, are the imperialists going to block them? But I agree with everything you said, right?
Yeah, definitely unite. So we're going to transition. That ends our weekly roundup. Make sure that you tune into us every Saturday as we discuss these very important current topics, as it affects the African community home and in the diaspora. And so we're going to continue our reading of the Wretched of the Earth. I hope everybody has the book or file so you can follow along and be a part of this discussion. Last week we were reading the first chapter. We started off there on violence, and in that chapter we discussed these two opposing forces, the colonists and the colonized, and we spoke about how colonialism was birthed. This current social system was birthed on the act of violence, and I think Fanon is talking about how it's just like almost quite natural for the colonized to respond with violence, and in order to overturn this system, it's like no uh, going around that. And so he spoke about the decolonization process being a violent process, and that the colonized now enters as an actor in history and becomes the subject of history rather than the object. And so we're going to go on to the second chapter this week, Grandeur and Weakness of Spontaneity. And we're going to start on page 89. So for all of those people who want to follow us, we're going to be on page 89. I'm looking at the book. Is that the same page in the file as well? Just to be clear.
I'm not 100% sure, but if anyone wants to follow, it's about probably about 5 pages from the end of the chapter. So if it's the pages numbers aren't the same, then.
All right. I'll make sure I'll have that for you guys next week. So we're going to start at the top of 89 where it says anti-racism. It begins with anti-racism. Anti-racism and the determination to defend one's skin, which is characteristic of the colonized response to colonial oppression, clearly represents sufficient reason to join the struggle. But one does not sustain a war, one does not endure massive repression or witness the disappearance of one's entire family in order for hatred or racism to triumph. Racism, hatred, resentment, and, quote, legitimate desire for revenge, end quote, alone cannot nurture a war of liberation. These flashes of consciousness which fling the body into a zone of turbulence, which plunge it into a virtually pathological dreamlike state where the sight of the other induces vertigo, where my blood calls for the blood of the other, where my death through mere inertia calls for the death of the other. This passionate outburst in the opening phase disintegrates if it is left to feed on itself. Of course, the countless abuses perpetrated by the colonialist forces reintroduce emotional factors into the struggle, give the militant further cause to hate and new reasons to set off in search of a, quote, colonist to kill, end quote. But day by day, leaders will come to realize that hatred is not an agenda. It will be perverse to count on the enemy who always manages to commit as many crimes as possible and can be relied upon to widen the, quote, the rift, end quote, thus driving the population as a whole to revolt. Whatever the case, we have already indicated that the enemy and the win over certain segments of the population, certain regions and chiefs. During the struggle, the colonists and the police force are introduced to modify their behavior and, quote, to become more human, end quote. They even go so far as to introduce the terms, quote unquote, sir, quote unquote, man, in the relations with the colonized. There is no end to the politeness and consideration. In fact, the colonized get the feeling changing. The colonized who took the arm only were dying of hunger. Say that again?
Yeah, I said, could I jump in right here? Because so when you said you wanted to read this part, it was perfect because I actually heard you had this highlighted because this is just so telling as far as today. Kwame Ture, he really breaks down that there's a real difference between mobilizing the people and organizing the people. So we have a lot of people who are okay with being mobilized. A lot of our people can get stirred up enough to go to a rally or to post on social media. And it's real easy to mobilize us inside of that type of way. And when you're looking at what Frantz Fanon is saying, he's saying is that we're inside of a colonized state. The colonist is always producing the conditions that are going to make us stir up the hatred of our oppression. So we can't rely on the colonists to be the one that's going to drive us into revolting against this system. We have to rely on ourselves. But I think that's very telling when you look at mobilization versus organization, because mobilization, you might be stirred up by the actions that the colonists are producing. But organization is whenever those emotions are gone, are you still planning? Are you still meeting? Are you still trying to figure out how to undo your oppression? So I really love this section.
Just to add to that, what Tiani said about the tactics and the tactics of what the oppressor always uses. One typical example of that is the World Trade Center. I think recently we just had an African lady, a woman who they have put in a position. And when it first happened, all on social media, African people share all around because it was a pride to them to see a Black female, in a position, which of course we love it, we embrace it. But I think we have spoken on issue like this several times, that we have to stop embracing individual symbolism with our collective effort. Now, right now, what the World Trade Center have done, or what the imperialists have done when it comes to COVID, people that will share this information about what the World Trade Center have done, blocking an access of healthcare for African people. If you start talking about that and sharing that, you will be the one to be hated by your own people, because in their mind, you'll be undermining an African woman who is in that position. And that's the kind of problem we're dealing with.
Just in case anyone's confused, you meant the World Trade Organization, not the
World Trade. The World Trade Organization. Sorry. Yeah.
It's okay. I don't want anyone to be trying to figure that out.
Yeah, indeed. And I think that was an important point too, as far as mobilization versus organization. And mobilization is good because it raises awareness. It pinpoints to a particular a problem and says that this is a social issue. This is a critical issue that needs to be solved. But it's afterwards, the organization part. That's how change comes about. Real change comes about through people organizing behind the scenes. And so I think it's important, though, that the people who organize behind the scenes represent the interests of the African working class. What happens for the most part after these mobilizations, you have the bourgeoisie come in and they get in front of whatever the social issue is. And so they come up with some sort of reformist solution to the problem. It really doesn't address the masses of people who are affected by this problem. But yeah, so I'll continue on. So the colonized who took up arms, not because they were dying of hunger and witnessing the disintegration of their society, but also because the colonists treated them like animals and considered them brutes, respond very favorably to such measures. These psychological devices diffuse their hatred. Experts and sociologists are a guiding force behind these colonialist maneuvers and conduct numerous studies on the subject of complexes, the complex of frustration, the complex of aggressiveness, and the complex of colonizability. The colonized subject is upgraded, and attempts are made to disarm him psychologically and naturally with a few coins. These paltry measures and clever window dressing manage to achieve some success. The colonized subject is so starved of anything that humanizes him, even if it is third rate, that these trivial handouts in some case manage to impress him. His consciousness is so vulnerable and so inscrutable that it is ignited by the slightest spark. The great undiscriminating thirst for enlightenment of the early days is threatened at every moment by a dose of mystification. The violent, unanimous demands of the revolution, which once lit up the sky, now shrink to more moderate proportions. The raging wolf, rabid with hunger, and the whirlwind, blowing in the genuine wind of revolt, may be rendered completely unrecognizable if the struggle continues, and it does continue. The colonized subject is at constant risk of being disarmed by any sort of concession.
Can we stop right there? Because I thought that was such a important point. That, like, we have to understand that these emotions that we feel are reactions to our oppression. Like, that was a really good point. They're studying our aggression. They're studying what sets us off. You literally see this in the American history. What commission was it following the civil rights movement? The Kerner Commission. Like, they literally will study, okay, what set them off? How do we, and it says it, how do we make these like concessions that we can pacify them? So we have to understand, whenever our reactions are being determined by the colonists, they're always studying how can we find ways to make them go back to normal. And that's, I think the state that we're in today is very much a state where we have been so put into a system where we're not reacting, because they basically set things up to where our means of feeling like we're actually addressing the issue are so limited. We feel like we have to become ingrained into the system. And we should understand that these are things that were set up, and that the only way that we're going to get out is through purposeful, organized means of destroying the mentality that things are okay and that, you know, we don't need to react or we don't need to organize. But that's all.
Yeah, nice. Did you want to add something, Frank? Good.
Yeah, I'm good.
Yeah, I think it's okay. And just to add to that, Frantz Fanon, in his work, I think the other book, Black Skin, White Mask, like in that book, and even in this book, he addresses the psychology of the colonists and the colonized. But going to your point, Tierney, you know, he talks about how the oppressed, I think it was in this book too, he talks about how the oppressed is oppressed for so long that they begin to oppress themselves. And that's on account too of what is put in place by the colonial institution, where they may think that these things is helping them, you know, that they're surviving, it's helping them out, and we engage in activities that we think is helping us out, but it's all along it's killing us. You know, it's genocide at the end of the day. We participate in our own oppression and genocide as a result of that. So I'll continue on. The leaders of the insurrection discovered this instability of the colonized with horror. At first disconcerted, they then realized the need to explain and ensure that the colonizers' consciousness does not get bogged down. In the meantime, the war goes on. The enemy organizes itself, gathers strength, and preempts the strategy of the colonized. The struggle for national liberation is not a question of bridging the gap in one giant stride. The epic is played out on a difficult day-to-day basis, and the suffering endured far exceeds that of the colonial period. Down in the towns, the colonists have apparently changed. Our people are happier. They are respected. A daily routine sets in, and the colonized engage in the struggle. The people who must continue to give it their support cannot afford to give in. They must not think the objective has already been achieved. When the actual objectives of the struggle are described, we must not think that they are impossible. Once again, clarification is needed, and the people have to realize where they are going and how to get there. The war is not one battle, but a succession of local struggles, none of which, in fact, is decisive. Keep going.
I mean, that was important, but you know, you can keep going. I don't like.
Let me say something on that quick. You see, yeah, sometime back in history, during the colonial period, the slave master at that time, what he wanted African to do was not to think, but just do as we say, just comply as we say. We would do the thinking. That is the slave master. We would do the thinking. That is the white supremacy. We would do the thinking. Don't think. Just do as we say. Just produce as we say. Just go on a plantation as we say. You have nothing to think about, right? Now, As time go by and as we start developing, as we start, learning and gaining knowledge, right, of ourselves, or what is right and what is wrong, and we start critically thinking and analyzing things, what the slave master did again was, okay, now they are thinking. They are not in a position that they are thinking. We cannot stop them. But what we can do is to stop them from analyzing what our intents are, what our intentions are towards them. We shouldn't allow them to critically think. We shouldn't allow them to critically analyze. They can think only in a way that will favor us, but not in a way that will favor them. And that is where most of our leaders, how to call it, got killed and got assassinated because they were critically thinking, they were critically analyzing the behavior and the intention of the white man, the intention of the neo-colonial or the colonialists, the intention of the white supremacy, and even up to now, as we continue to analyze their intention, their behavior, what is in their mind, it always become a problem for them.
I love this particular part where he says the leaders of the insurrection discover this instability of, the movement or the people or of the colonized with horror. And that's true. Like, if you're someone who's trying to organize with the people, trying to lead us into a direction where we are loosening the bounds of enslavement from ourselves, and you kind of like see how our people just get settled in, to basically taking the bait, from the colonists. And even it's not even something so simple as going back to, a daily routine in corporate America or whatever. It's even like how we are on social media, like how we prioritize things. Like we could be really talking about the actual issue, the centralized system that has been oppressing our people, but we will talk about things that are absolutely meaningless. Absolutely, regardless of if we solve this problem or not, it will not deter a situation. I'm trying to think of a random debate. Like even so, and this is not something that's not important, but look at how, you get into debates about, oh, I can't wear my hair a certain way at work, or I have to do this, because I'm dark skinned or light skinned. Those things, okay, fine, if you want to deal with them. But if you're not also dealing at the same time with the central focus of our oppression being white supremacy, then that is kind of like, to me, the same thing. Like I see it all the time. We get derailed, the ADOS arguments, versus Pan-Africanism, versus the diaspora wars. We get into these modes of just responding to things that have absolutely no effect on the colonized state. And so I respond to that with horror sometimes, because sometimes I'm just like, yo, like all the things we could be talking about, all the things that are happening, all the violence that's being inflicted on our people. And we are talking about things that, regardless of if or if not you win this debate on social media, that will not change your situation as it relates to our people. So, but I mean, I think, the hope that he gives us is that the battle is not, won, but it's a bunch of local struggles and fights. So that means that we're not necessarily going to see the wins of all the efforts that we're putting in. We have to keep struggling as a people. So that's, I really like that particular section. I think we can go on.
Hey, I'm because I was looking, glad you summed that up. I was looking at the same sentences within the paragraph, so that was spot on. So what I'm going to do is, because of the time, I'm going to read this paragraph and then give you two a minute or two just to give your thoughts on this paragraph before we wrap up. So there is therefore a need to save one's strength and not waste it by throwing everything into the balance. The reserves of colonialism are far richer and more than those of the colonized, and the war goes on. The enemy digs in. The great showdown is not for today or for tomorrow. In fact, it began on the very first day and will not end with the demise of the enemy, but quite simply when the latter has come to realize, for a number of reasons, that it is in his interest to terminate the struggle and acknowledge the sovereignty of the colonized people. The objectives of the struggle must not remain as loosely defined as they were in the early days. If we are not careful, there is the constant risk that the people will ask, why continue the war every time the enemy makes the slightest concession? We have become so used to the occupier's contempt and his determination to maintain his stranglehold, whatever the cost, that any semblance of generosity or any sign of goodwill is greeted with surprise and jubilation. The colonized then tend to break into song. The militant must be supplied with further, more searching explanations so that the enemy's concessions do not pull the wool over his eyes. These concessions, which are nothing but concessions, do not address the essence of the problem. And from the colonizer's perspective, it is clear that a concession does not truly address the problem until it strikes the heart of the colonial regime.
Perfect. So,
yeah.
Oh, I can give my closing.
So,
Oh no, you go ahead.
Yeah.
You go.
Well, go ahead. I'll wrap it up after. If y'all had something, I guess a minute, you wanted to make a final remark on that passage. I think it was like all of this. I guess I'll say something. So, like, I feel like a lot of things that are being addressed in here is definitely talking about the need. Well, I guess the trials that we have as far as organizing the working class, the African masses, because of the colonists constantly feeding them with propaganda that's misinforming them and misleading them, making them feel, I guess, how you say, like pacifying them in their oppression. Malcolm talked about it, like how they do things to pacify us, and we suffer peacefully. And so this is what's happening. Let me not be long-winded. Let you guys go.
No, you were good. And like, to me, like, this section brought me to the Democratic Party, like, instantly, or even to like, and no disrespect to them, but a lot of the civil rights organizations, when he said, the colonized break out into song, you have these concessions and they're like, yay, we won. And none of these concessions go to the heart of the issue. I have a real problem when people say that we progressed so much from what happened in the 60s or before that. Whenever you look at how the fact that we have no more power than we had at that time, you might have a few individuals who get to be millionaires and maybe a couple billionaires. You might have some Black faces inside of places where they're basically elevated, into the white capitalist establishment, but our condition as a people are the same. And until we think about ourselves as a collective and understand that for every Oprah, there's about 10 or 20 Breonna Taylors, that makes you change how you're going to. And by the way, I believe today's the assassination, the anniversary of her assassination. So all prayers to her family and friends. But, for everyone, Will Smith, there's going to be 50 George Floyds. Like, we have to think that way, because when you look at things like that, then your understanding of your situation as a colonized people is very much not going to be something that's favorable. So all these songs that we sing, all these, coming together and going to the churches with the white Democrats that come in and sit with us, and we feel good or whatever, because we can talk about how things have changed so much from how they used to be. But the power situation is the exact same as it was. That's really what we should be focused on. So that's my closing thoughts on this section. Frank, what you got?
My closing thought on this session would be what I get from this session is that we as African people, in every entity or in every sector of our life, we should be like a meditator. We should be like a meditant. We should have a code to communicate our interest to each other. We can be in different organizations, but as long as it is anything to benefit us, to empower us, just like the oppressor, because they are in different organizations, they are in different sectors, they are in different era of life. But when it comes to their empowerment, when it comes to them, there is a code that none of them can deviate from. So in that same way, we should be in that same place where we find ourselves in different entities, but as it relates to us, our empowerment, our life, everything about us, we should have a code. It doesn't matter whether we are in different organization or different position or different entity. We should all come together in our interest and work together. And that is, a military force. We should think in our way that, okay, there's a military code in here that we can only share among ourselves, that we can only share with us, that can only go along with our movement, that can only go along with our struggle. No matter what it is, we should always see ourselves as one people who is battling the same beast.
All right. I want to thank you for those closing remarks. I want to thank everyone for tuning in and sharing this discussion with us. We're here every Saturday at 10 a.m. So make sure that you tune in. Make sure that you also get in contact with us. Find out how you can get involved as we continue to build this movement. The institution that we have, colonialism, is for all African people, Black people. So get involved in your own liberation and get organized. So it's not enough to just be a part of these discussions, but be involved in the process to liberate Africa and the African people wherever we are. So get involved with building institutions like the Justice Bank, which supports our membership and protect us against the injustice system of the United States of America and our people. So thank you for tuning in, and hopefully we'll see you next week.